This is a man revered by thousands, but not the Egyptian Pharaoh. He was the first mutant on Earth. He proclaimed himself the god that rules over all mankind. No one knows how long he will live, because every time his body ages, the 4 bodyguards protecting him will find a new body, and then shift his consciousness to the body. New. This time they found a mutant with superhuman healing powers. As long as he successfully teleported, he would inherit the full power of this body. When light hits the top of the pyramid, the curse above is immediately activated. The power that followed the wall gradually gathered into the teleportation platform. His consciousness began to shift to his new body. Right at this time, the people who had been oppressed for a long time took the opportunity to start an uprising. They broke the wooden pole, causing a giant stone weighing hundreds of tons to slide into the heart of the pyramid, destroying the bearing wall. The 2 inside the closed pyramid prepare to fight to the death with 4 bodyguards, but they are no match for the mutant. Less than a duel, all of them have been defeated. At this point, Apocalypse teleportation has reached its final step, but the pyramid begins to collapse. The needle peak from the place of the curse falls to the ruins. No light shines in. The teleportation is forced to stop. Midway again, the 4 bodyguards were all buried in the tower. Before dying, the female knight tried to use the last of her strength to cover Apocalypse's body with a protective shell, successfully protecting his flesh. So a mighty Apocalypse was buried in the earth forever. Until thousands of years later, a group of foolish believers came here. Light shone through the entrance of the cave they had dug. The teleportation ritual interrupted thousands of years ago was suddenly restarted. Fast characters quickly glowed along the rubble. After that, the demon awakened and looked at the surrounding rubble. Apocalypse did not understand what had happened. Then he suddenly appeared on the street, but everything in front of him made him suddenly bewildered. The current world is very strange to him, and he himself has been forgotten by people. At this moment, a mutant girl caught his attention. This girl glared, and the surrounding wind immediately blew. She took the opportunity to steal money from the shopkeeper, then was stopped by them in the alley. Seeing her fellow human being so pathetic to this extent, Apocalypse immediately became angry. He lifted his hand lightly, and the crowd turned to dust. He is the oldest mutant on Earth. Due to the sudden interruption of the teleportation ritual, he woke up in the ground 3,000 years later. He appeared on a crowded street. The car moved and discovered that his fellow was possessed by some salesman. The crowd saw that the once powerful mutant was now so tragic. Apocalypse was angry. He gently lifted his hand to the dust around, suddenly cut off the heads of all 3. Then he rolled his eyes, causing the man to disappear into the wall. Then Apocalypse went to the girl's house. He wanted to know what happened in the world during thousands of years of deep sleep. He put his hand on the television and within seconds he understood all human knowledge. Only then did he realize that the world was now controlled by countries with nuclear weapons. Unexpectedly, a small human being like an ant would dare to rule the world. He decides to rebuild his empire so that the powerful mutant takes control of the earth again. The first step is to establish 4 new bodyguards. Apocalypse has an extremely high skill. He can transform mutants' superpowers. After gaining strength from him, became the first bodyguard to follow him. They then find Sailor, whose weapon is to control everything according to her mind, and Apocalypse's eyes widen again, making her powers 100 times stronger. Later introduced by Sailor, they found a 3rd mutant Angel. Angel wings that were severely injured in a duel are now disabled, but are empowered by Apocalypse. He started escaping. Not only grew skin, feathers as hard as steel, but the whole body was replaced with precious skin. Now 3 out of 4 bodyguards have been found, the last one being Mark. He originally lived as an ordinary person, but that day the furnace suddenly broke. He was forced to use his superpower to save people, but this kind act was sued by his colleagues. Many policemen surrounded his residence, because in their eyes mutants were extremely dangerous existences. In order to protect the family, Mark was voluntarily arrested, but at this time, his daughter suddenly gained superpowers. The sad girl cried and cried, causing a flock of crows to attack the police. In a panic, a policeman shot a bow. Mother and daughter were pierced by arrows and died on the spot. Mark held their bodies in pain, despair. He took out his daughter's gold chain, clenched it tightly and then released it, causing all the policemen to roll over dead in front of his eyes. Then it was the turn of these ungrateful workers. But at this moment, Apocalypse and 3 bodyguards appeared behind him. Mark originally thought that they were coming to stop him, but Apocalypse rolled his eyes. All the workers were suddenly buried in the ground. Then Apocalypse looked at Mark's eyes to the place where his father was killed by humans in the past. Thinking of the scene where his parents and wife and children were tragically killed, Mark was completely brainwashed and turned into a bad person. When Mark is completely brainwashed, how terrible it is to be the bad guy. The surrounding buildings all collapsed under his powerful magnetic field. Even the metal deep in the Earth's crust was controlled by him. He angrily vented all the hatred in his heart, causing an entire town to be destroyed immediately. On the other side, Professor X and the others, after learning about what happened to Mark, successfully found Mark through the brainwave amplifier. But at this moment, Apocalypse sensed the existence of Professor X. He opened his eyes and immediately entered the spiritual world of Professor X. I have never seen such great power. Professor X's psychic control is exactly what Apocalypse is looking for. Then Apocalypse uses this ability to overpower all the soldiers guarding nuclear weapons around the world. All nuclear weapons of the countries are fired at the same time. So the nuclear weapon that always makes people proud has been thrown into space. At this point, Professor X had regained some consciousness. He immediately told Psylocke to break the amplifier. Professor X had a hard time escaping Apocalypse's control. But only then Apocalypse and 4 bodyguards appeared. Mark waved his hand, and Professor X was immediately drawn to him. Cyber wants to stop, but hits a fireplane, causing a violent explosion. It was at this moment that time seemed to stand still, because the fastest man in the world had arrived. His superpower was fast movement. Looking at the sight that seemed to be standing still, you could see how terrifying his speed was. Then, the moment before they were blown up, he saved all the mutants in the school out. The first step is to get Mystique and the FBI agent out. In the blink of an eye, all 3 of them reached the safe zone. Next was rescuing the students in the Great Hall, not forgetting this goldfish. Next is the boy who is stroking his handsome hair. Then, one by one, he was carried out quickly. One by one, even the son who was eating pizza was carried out. Finally, the landing couldn't be more spectacular with a couple. Everyone in the X-Men school was successfully rescued. On this side, Apocalypse propagates a message to the whole world, that I will destroy all mankind. The Earth must be ruled by a powerful mutant like Professor X, who secretly sends his students a top-secret message, telling Jin about his current location. After receiving the message, Jin immediately brings a group of mutants to the rescue, but now Apocalypse is preparing to take the final step of his plan. Being the oldest mutant on Earth, his strength is definitely invincible. His terrible power caused the whole city to suddenly die to ashes. Then all the stones gradually gathered, forming a majestic pyramid that appeared right in front of you. Apocalypse then turned the sand into a mask and gave it to Mark. With his powerful magnetic field, all the metal objects on the Earth were blown away. Humanity sat helplessly watching the dire scene. The thousands of years civilization had been destroyed. At this time, Apocalypse brought Professor X into the pyramid to conduct cognitive teleportation, thereby robbing Professor X's psychic control ability, just successfully teleporting. All people in the world were controlled by him. But when it came to the last step, Jin brought the party to the place. Nightcrawler stepped in first, just in time to save Professor X from the teleportation, so it was interrupted midway. Apocalypse was furious, then immediately chased out. But the scene suddenly stopped, only to see that very quickly Apocalypse was blown away a few meters away. Then he rushed to attack Apocalypse, but Apocalypse rolled his eyes, quickly predicted his move, then used a way to tie him up. At this time, Mystique had turned into Psylocke, intended to sneak attack Apocalypse, but Apocalypse's healing power was too terrible. Then Apocalypse used Mystique to force Professor X to appear. Seeing that Mystique was about to be strangled, Professor X suddenly thought of it. His spiritual world and Apocalypse are still connected. Professor X then directly infiltrates Apocalypse's brain, but he slightly underestimates Apocalypse's psychic powers. Professor X was too small in front of him. When Apocalypse returned to prepare to take Professor X away, suddenly 2 large iron bars stopped him. The one who betrayed me? Not before I betrayed them. Mark came to his senses, started attacking Apocalypse, then Psylocke also attacked, but to this extent Apocalypse is still unharmed, and Professor X is tortured by him, no longer able to resist. Professor X is about to lose his life at the hands of Apocalypse. But at this moment, the one person who entered their spiritual world was Jin. She radiated her full power. The professor shouted, "Fuck him." Apocalypse's psychic powers were broken to pieces. His body was also unable to withstand Jin's attack. The others immediately rushed to help. Apocalypse saw that the situation was unstable, fled. Unexpectedly Storm also betrayed him. He could not turn. At this point, Jin continued to attack. Her powers were fully unleashed, causing Apocalypse to be destroyed to ashes. Then, with Jin's efforts, the world was rebuilt.